So with one of the biggest warm-ups for the US Open over with in Canada, we had the men and the women's tournament, of course, over two different cities. They play Montreal and Toronto. And we had some, I guess, unique champions. It's a first-time champion, so let's have a look at the results before we go to the rankings. So starting on the women's side of things, Mboko, she got the win over Osaka in the final, 2-6, 6-4, 6-1 to lift the biggest trophy of her career and really announce herself to the world. And she got a massive boost in the rankings as well. Important boost in the rankings before the US Open. And Ben Shelton, he had a great week as well, lifting his first 1,000 trophy by beating Hashanov in the final 6-7, 6-4, 7-6. And he also got a very important boost in the rankings. So a couple of new 1,000 champions, but I'm sure it's not going to be the last time that we see them at this stage. All right, let's have a look at the players outside the top 10 that went in the rankings after the 1,000 event. On the women's side, Towson. She went up to number 15 in the world, 4 spots higher than last week after making the semifinals of Canada, and that's a career high for her. And she's had such a great season, and we know how dangerous she can be because we also saw her beat Swiatek this week. So definitely want to watch, maybe as a dark horse for the US Open. And Mboko, she also went up to a career high ranking to 24 in the world, which was 61 spots higher than last week. And Naomi Osaka, she goes up to 25 in the world, which is 24 spots higher than last week, and also should be seeded at the US Open once we get through Cincinnati. So very important week for those two to make the final and get a lot of points, but also Towson having a great week. Players that went down to the rankings. Ostapenko, she went down 4 spots to number 30 in the world, which puts her on, like, I guess the cutoff line for the seeds, because of course the top 32 get a seed at the US Open, and she has got to do well in Cincinnati, otherwise she could be in danger of losing her spot. Raducanu, she went down 9 spots to 39 in the world, and she's in the similar position because she was sort of on that cutoff line, but now she's down to 39, so she's really got to do well in Cincinnati. And Buskova, after playing really well, she went down 13 spots to 52 in the world, even though she's been in some good form. So some players there that really need a good week in Cincinnati to try and get back in that seeded position. On the men's side of things, Hashanov, he went up 4 spots to number 12 in the world after making the final of Canada, and that's a nice boost in the rankings for him. Popperin, he went up 7 spots to number 19 in the world after having a really good week, making the quarterfinals of Canada as the defending champion. And Tien, he goes up 6 spots to number 55 in the world, which is a career high for him. And he's starting to find some form again back on the hard courts like he did at the start of the year. So he won't be seeded at the US Open unless he does something crazy in Cincinnati, but definitely a floating unseeded player that everybody should be scared of. Players that went down to the rankings, Kaboli, he went down 5 spots to number 22 in the world after losing points from this time last year. Hurkacz, he went down 3 spots to 40 in the world, and Korda went 12 spots down to 45 in the world. Now, a couple of those guys are injured, and a couple of those guys aren't going to be playing the US Open at this stage, so the ranking doesn't really matter at this point for their US Open. But Kaboli, who's been really good this year, dropping down 5 spots, that's pretty huge for him. So he needs to have a good week in Cincinnati to regain some confidence and get the ranking up a little bit more. All right, I'll start on the WTA side of things with the top 10 because we had a couple of changes, but nothing major, with Sabalenka at the top and Gauff staying at number 2, Swiatek at 3, and Pegula at 4. Andreeva stays at number 5, but Keys, she went up 2 spots to number 6 in the world after having a decent week in Canada, pushing Zhang down to number 7, who of course isn't playing for the next few weeks because of injury. And Islamova goes down to number 8. Paolini stays at 9, and Badosa falls out of the top 10 with Raducanu coming back into the top 10 after having a good week in Canada. So top 10's looking a little bit different down the bottom, but of course, with 1,000 points on the line next week, and also with players like Pegula and Sabalenka defending a lot of points over the next couple of tournaments, we might even see some changes in that top 5 over the next month or so. Over to the race of the finals now, and things are starting to get really interesting, but Sabalenka still the only player who is qualified on points, with Swiatek at number 2. Not too far behind. I think if she has a good week in Cincinnati and makes the final or wins the title, she might get qualified as well on points. Gauff stays at number 3 with Keys at number 4. Andreeva at 5 with Anisimova at 6. Pegula stays at number 7. But then Raducanu, she goes up to number 8, pushing Paolini down to number 9. And Svitolina rounds out the top 10. So no massive changes, but again, another 1,000 points on the line next week. It's going to be really important for a lot of these players to take advantage of that because we don't have too many big tournaments left. And after the US Open, that's when things start to get real serious and players start to qualify for this event. Over to the men's side of things, and again, no change at the top with Sinner at 1 and Alcaraz at 2, despite not playing in Canada this week. Zverev stays at 3 with Fritz at 4. Draper stays at 5. But Shelton, he goes up to number 6, pushing Djokovic down to number 7 after winning his first 1,000 title. And Ben Shelton is just sneaking up the rankings very slowly. It wasn't too long ago that he kind of jumped in the top 10 without too much of a buzz. And now he's almost in the middle of the top 10. So Shelton is just chipping away at the rankings, and who knows, maybe after the US Open, he might even be the highest ranked American. De Minaur, he stays at number 8 with Rune at 9, and Musetti stays at number 10. So, yeah, really, Shelton is the big story here because not only did he win his first 1,000, but he is slowly closing in on Draper and then also maybe Fritz. And if he does well in Cincinnati and, of course, does well at the US Open, which we've seen him do well before, Shelton could be in the top 4 in about a month's time, which would be crazy to see, but also so much fun to see because Shelton is so much fun to watch. So having a look at the race of the finals now, and there was no change at the top with Alcaraz at 1 and Sinner at 2. And of course, Alcaraz qualifying for the finals on points, and so did Sinner this week. So both guys are going to be playing the ATP Finals at this stage, qualified on points, even though they've already won slams, which kind of gets them qualified, sort of. They're both now officially qualified based on their ranking points. We did have a lot of changes after that, with Zverev going up 1 spot into that number 3 spot, Djokovic dropping down 2 spots, number 5, and Shelton adding 1,000 points to his total, going up to that number 4 spot. So Shelton really taking advantage of not having some of the best players in the world playing in Canada and taking that 1,000 title with massive amount of points at this time of year. So he goes in number 4. As I said, Djokovic at 5. Fritz went up to number 6 with Draper dropping down to number 7. De Minaur stays at 8 with Musetti dropping down to number 9. And Ruud rounds out the top 10 for this week. So no new players or no different players coming into this lineup, but a lot of changes within it. And of course, another 1,000 points up for grabs next week. But this time, the only couple of players that are not playing are Draper and Djokovic. So it's going to be a lot harder to try and beat Sinner and Alcaraz at this tournament next week and get that 1,000 points. So for Shelton and Fritz also, making the most of last week and taking advantage of the absence of those guys has really helped them in this race to the finals. So there you have it. They are the rankings for this week. A lot of movement, a lot of changes because, of course, we didn't have some of the best players in the world playing. And also on the women's side, there are actually a lot of upsets. Even though Sabalenka didn't play, Gauff lost pretty early. Swiatek lost earlier than expected. So it was really interesting to see who could take advantage. Of course, Mboko winning her first 1,000 title and putting herself in a great position going into the US Open. I think a lot of buzz around her as well to see how she does in New York. And being seeded, that means she won't have to play a top 30 player until the 3rd round, which is going to be really good to see. We'll officially talk about the seeds next week when Cincinnati's over, because that's when it locks in. Let me know down in the comments below, what was your favorite part of Canada? I know it was a little bit of a slower tournament because it went for 2 weeks, and the start of the tournament was a little bit hard to watch because not much was going on except for a couple upsets, but it ended with a bang, and that's what we want to see. Those finals are epic on the men and women's side, but there it is. Those are the rankings for this week, and we're really starting to get some movement before the US Open.